Our podcast is about leadership sometimes, and sometimes it's about sandwiches. So,
True.
do you have a favorite sandwich? And is it bad if someone doesn't have a planned career path or a map?
Oh my God, I love this.
Mike, we're at an interesting time of year. And I say it by this. I have tough decisions of what leftover Halloween candy I want to eat. And then preparing for the deluge of Christmas candy. It's tough. It's tough.
There's a lot of candy, and Kate, my wife, decided to pull a lot of it last night and said, "You had enough, you're good to go." But speaking of Christmas, is it too early for all these Christmas commercials?
I mean, I've been seeing them for like before Halloween. They started coming out. It's too early.
In like July.
Yeah. I went to Costco to get string cheese because that's what you do. And in Costco, and this was weeks ago, Christmas decorations everywhere. And I'm like, I'm just not there. I know listen, whenever you want to decorate for Christmas, whatever floats your boat, there's no rules, do whatever. But I'm very seasonal. And I need to get now through the NCAA season, then, get ready for the NFL playoff season, and then, we'll hit Christmas.
And we're skipping over Thanksgiving. That's a thing, right? People still do it.
Yeah, that's where I get my pumpkin pie. I mean, that's it, right? Other than that, and watching the Cowboys lose on Thanksgiving, that's it.
And all the great music, the Thanksgiving music. No, maybe there's not Thanksgiving music, but
there should be. Well, Adam Sandler had a song, right? I think that's about it. But yeah, there needs to be more. That's what we should do. We should get into the Thanksgiving music creation. We should get our own studio for Thanksgiving music.
It might go better than this.
Mariah Carey of Thanksgiving. Mariah Carey of Thanksgiving.
Right. I read a quote today that said, "Stop doubting yourself. Growth happens when you do something you're not qualified for." And for me, it might be this podcast or that.
Well, we have a great show today, and we're going to talk to somebody who is qualified. Meg McKeen is going to be joining us. Really has been there and done that in the insurance world, and is now taking her knowledge really across the globe with leadership and consulting. And we're going to pick her brain on a lot of things. So stick around. We're excited for today's podcast. We have Meg McKeen with us. Meg is the founder and consultant with Adjunct Advisors. She's worked for a number of insurers over her career. And Meg is a project-based consultant in the insurance industry who partners with values-driven organizations to create customized learning experiences, provide coaching that fosters healthy workplace cultures, and professional growth. She also hosts her own podcast, Bound and Determined, a podcast supporting women in the insurance industry. Meg, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here, JD. Mike, thanks for having me. I'm excited for whatever is to come.
Well, we're going to have fun today, and there's so much we want to learn from you. We dive into origin stories and journeys and leadership here in C-Level Up. And so I have to start off. What made you want to start Adjunct Advisors?
Oh, we could spend our whole time just with the backstory, but I'll catch everyone up quickly. I had a very, I'll say, traditional start to my career. I got an entry-level position in insurance right out of college and bopped around, fortunately had some opportunities to move around, earned some promotions, tried out some new vantage points in the industry. And about 7 years ago, hit a point in my life because I believe, and I don't think we honor enough, that we're living our personal stories while we're writing our career stories. I had, in that time, gone through a marriage and a divorce. I had moved from Ohio to the suburbs of Chicago into downtown Chicago, and I had really reestablished who I was as a woman and as a professional woman. And all of a sudden, looking at my career, some things just weren't in alignment. And that's a word that I use a lot. So I was earning a good living and I had opportunities and was challenged. And yet I wasn't feeling a sense of pride for the work that I was doing, or that the best parts of who I am as a human were the ones that I was bringing to my work every day. And so I ended up in a very uncharacteristic, I am like a classic good girl, do what you're told, don't rock the boat, always toe the line, quit my job without a job. And frankly, without a lot of a plan. I was really frustrated with the insurance industry and started to daydream about doing something completely unrelated that was much more in alignment with my passion and my heart. And then 6 months went by, I stretched it to a year, and the reality set in that I had at that point 19 years of experience in this industry. I knew a lot, and I knew a lot of people, and started to reconsider, what if I didn't run away from it, but what if I stayed and introduced a different way of looking at the industry. And so somewhat begrudgingly, because I still, to this day, there's a lot about the insurance industry that's super frustrating to me. But the work that I get to do and the alignment that I've found with my clients brings me a different level of satisfaction than I was able to find when I was a more, I'll say, traditionally corporate employed person. And so to answer your question, a little bit of desperation, little bit of like, you need to make a living, Meg. You cannot retire at 40. I am not independently wealthy over here. And also curiosity and taking a bet on myself and knowing full well that the insurance industry would catch me if I fell, if I needed to go, quote unquote, back. I was highly employable and highly networked. And I knew that would be an option for me. So it was a very precarious time in my life that brought me all sorts of lessons and learning, to say the least.
Meg, I've heard you in your pod talk about the typical insurance nerd. So I have to know, what does the nerd look like, and does he have a funny voice?
First, I have to say I've never been interviewed by a comedian, so you're gonna win. You get all the prizes. I mean, I am not an insurance nerd. I'm proud that I don't read insurance policies for fun and on the weekends, and I don't try to ruin dinner parties by, talking about life insurance to all my friends and family. But insurance is a highly technical business, and I'm really glad that there are those people out there that I have on speed dial, that when I get myself into a situation and I need that real technical support, that it's available. But where I fit in, and what I always felt like was missing, was this humanity to the work that we do. And a lot of people were showing up every day and they're doing their job and they're doing it well, but they're not feeling, again, that alignment, or that the best parts of who they are the things that they're exercising at work. And so an insurance nerd is a real avatar out there. And a lot of people, the more you bumble around LinkedIn, and I don't know that y'all hang out with a lot of insurance professionals, but I do. It's the most common headline that you will see on LinkedIn is insurance nerd, and then, other things. But it's pretty funny that I don't know that other industries self-proclaim themselves to be nerds, but a lot of us do.
As you started down this advisory path, what do you feel was lacking in the insurance industry?
Well, I don't love insurance. I mean, I do it for a living and I've worn a lot of hats. I was an insurance agent. I still am licensed. I don't sell anymore, but my last corporate role was in sales. And next to attorneys and used car salespeople, we rank right up there. And that's a fact. That is not conjecture. That is a fact. In terms of untrustworthiness and just a general disdain, people don't like us. And largely because we historically in our business have operated from a place, when you think about the insurance sales transaction, is I'm going to create a lot of fear, and I'm going to ask you to think about the absolute worst case scenario in your life or your business. And then I'm going to dangle an insurance product in front of you that's going to solve all of those fears. And for a lot of us, those fears never come true. And so we end up shelling out what feels like a lot of money for a thing that never materializes. Or when it does, it's not covered the way we thought it would be, or as much as we thought would be, or the process is clunky. And so in general, insurance has this really, really poor persona out there. And on the front end, I don't think that we do enough to hold the professionals in the industry accountable from a learning and development standpoint. And so I married the two. in my business. When I first started out, I do sales coaching still and a lot more. But when I first started out, all I was doing was sales coaching. And I really wanted individuals that had been at this for more than maybe 6 months, so understood what insurance was and had a little bit of that technical knowledge going on, to really start to lean into who they are and what differentiates them as a professional while they're out there building new client relationships. And can you do this in a way that isn't leading with price, that isn't leading with the things that have given us this kind of sleazy reputation, but being honest and being forthright and being empathetic and owning when things go bad and knowing what your strengths are and leveraging the heck out of those. And frankly, it's the model I used when I was selling successfully. And so I knew that it worked. I mean, I was kind of my own case study. And I'd like to say that the industry opened its arms wide to me and said, thank goodness, here you are. We've been waiting for 150 years for you, Meg. But that was not the case. It's the way that I go about doing business and the things that I'm teaching these sales professionals are very different than what most of the gurus, if you will, are out there talking about 10xing your business overnight and filling your pipeline and dialing for dollars. And I knew wholeheartedly, because I had felt this way as an old millennial, a young Gen Xer, millennials and Gen Zs coming into the industry are not going to do it that way. They're not going to play the game for 10 years or 15 years to build a book of business and then coast. They want to do it in a way that feels, again, that alignment where they can show up as the human beings that they are in every other facet of their life, but in work as well. And so it has taken time. It's taken a lot of conversation and a lot of other people being curious enough to lean in and to hear what I have to say and to maybe try a thing or two, and then to go all in and realize I can do it another way. And that success, as it was outlined maybe by someone in another generation or another office in the building, can look very different for me, and that both are okay. That was a lot, you guys. That was a lot.
That was great.
Give me a microphone and I will talk.
I have a question. So, as you know, I'm in the wine business. And so alcohol is part of an everyday thing for us.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise. Could you speak to maybe some of the conversations you've had about alcohol in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for asking. And I totally appreciate that. As a person who has been sober for coming up on 2 years, to have this conversation with someone that works in the alcohol industry, I think that's a beautiful metaphor for where we are in life, frankly, right now. I have my whole life navigated anxiety. I didn't know that until much more recently. And in some of my own independent research, if you will, I've learned about what can be a correlation between your nervous system and alcohol consumption, either during or after. And for me, it was always the after. It was that day or two following drinking excessively where I would have lots of just really negative thoughts, and it really was unhealthy for me. And I didn't want to give up alcohol, but I was curious enough for 30 days to say, what would happen if I eliminated it? And so 2 years later, it was the right decision for me. And one of the things that has always been at the forefront, alcohol is very prevalent in the insurance industry. I can't speak to other industries because I haven't worked there, but so many happy hours and so many golf outings. And so, we tell these stories from the back, 3 martini lunches, and so much business got done. And when I think about my whole body of work, there were so many times when situations weren't great and alcohol was involved. Having been involved in sexual harassment in the past, it wasn't on Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. It was at late at night at a bar when alcohol was involved. And so I started to draw some of these parallels. And as I always do in my business, I speak from the first person. And this is my story, but this is all like, if you're taking notes, this is a good tip, especially when you think about social media. It's a way to draw people in and also let people know that you are or are not for them. And so when I speak from the first person about my decision to not drink alcohol, it's not that I am judging anyone who does. It's that this is the choice that I made and this is the result. And so I do that when I talk about burnout. I do that, and I hope you guys can hang in for this, but as a woman at 46 who's going through menopause, I talk very openly about what brain fog feels like and what it's like to have racing thoughts at 3 a.m. And 100% of the time, quote unquote, the right people meet me for those conversations, whether it's on the podcast or whether it's on LinkedIn or one-on-one. And that is such a beautiful differentiator from the noise that's out there, is being willing to have these real and vulnerable conversations. And alcohol is such a hot button for a lot of people right now. There's a lot of people that are dipping their toe into the sober curious movement, and insurance is no different. And I've chosen to share my experience from the first person, and it's been received exceptionally well. There's been a lot of people that have come out more quietly, whether it's a DM or an email, letting me know about their own sobriety journey, or just recognizing we might be smart to pay some attention to what's going on here. And so it's important to me that the space is never shameful or judgmental, but really creating, there's an opportunity here for a different conversation or a different experience, and all of those can exist at the same time.
Thank you so much for sharing. And you posted something on LinkedIn about that recently as well, in seeing the outpouring of support and people who feel the same way has been outstanding. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have a ton more we're going to dive into. We're going to find out challenges in the insurance industry, where AI plays into all of this, and some advice from you for other people in the industry. So stick around.
Oh no, mowing your lawn and your shoulder pain came back? You're probably asking yourself the same questions as always. Will I be able to sleep tonight? Can I walk my daughter down the aisle? And also, who killed JFK? And could I have stopped it? Introducing Icy Hot Wings. Each wing is frozen, uncooked, and smothered in hot sauce to create the perfect, cool, delicious distraction from your pain. You'll be able to sleep again, walk anyone's daughter down the aisle, and travel back in time and save a president. So help your wing with Icy Hot Wings and get back to the backyard. That is, when you get back to the future.
So I have to ask you, Meg, what are some of these common challenges that you see from leaders in the field today?
There are several right now. One that has plagued our industry for a long time is staffing and talent, drawing people in the door, but also helping them to see where they fit and encouraging them to stick around for a while. So the talent shortage is real in our industry. The average age of an insurance professional is in their 50s. And with the wave of baby boomers that are nearing or at retirement age, there's just a huge part of the business that will be abandoned. And so a lot of opportunities for young people coming into the business, but also a lot of opportunity for upward mobility for those that are already here, if they choose it. And that's part two, which is what I'm seeing. I don't work exclusively with women, but speaking through a feminine lens, a lot of my clients and a lot of the conversations I'm part of do involve women. A lot of women are opting out. So they're getting to a point where they've reached maybe a VP or an SVP level, and maybe the C-suite was in their sight line. And of course, that would come with more money, but it might also come with more travel and more of that nearly impossible juggling that any working parent, man or woman, is doing. And so they're getting to a point where they're like, I'm making a good living and I've got a certain amount of autonomy or empowerment to do my job and to do it in a way that's gratifying. And the thing will never find the elusive work-life balance. They've got some semblance of that. And so their boss is knocking on their cubicle wall that they're in a couple days a week or hitting them up over Teams. And they're like, yeah, I'm good. I think I'm going to sit tight here. And it doesn't mean that someday they may not want to be promoted or to continue to move up that proverbial ladder, but they're really opting out in favor of spending more time with family, if that's their priority, or just other interests, frankly. And it's really causing the industry to kind of scratch its head because, again, as an old millennial, young Gen Xer, a lot of us grew up in that environment where you keep climbing and you keep climbing until you get to the top. And so to opt out can feel very foreign and frankly, very uncomfortable for a lot of the people that I chat with, because it is very much going against the grain.
There's a famous line, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Yeah.
JD claims he wrote that. Don't look that up. So what about a work-life balance for you? What does that look like?
Well, it's curious, and I do a lot of disclaiming, in my life. I identify as a woman, and that's kind of where the conversation stops. I'm not a mother. I'm partnered but not married, and have no intention to live with my partner. And so my footprint is quite small and quite simple. And so as I disclaim, I also tend to diminish, and I'm working on that because even as a one woman show who's responsible for everything, that comes with its own set of responsibility and weight. And so I'm very careful not to compare. I'm my older brother is a couple years older than I am. He's raising two wonderfully bright and athletic children, and he's never not in the car driving them to sports practice. And he'll call occasionally and he'll say, "What are you doing? Where are you?" And I'm making dinner, I'm doing laundry, I'm watching something on Netflix. And he's very happy where he is, but also there's this pang of like, man, wouldn't it be nice to be able to get caught up on laundry or Netflix? And I thought I would be a mom. I thought I would be partnered. I'm divorced, and thought that was very much part of my story. And so I am playing the hand that I'm dealt, all while being very respectful that we're all on our own individual paths, and that work-life balance for me might be slightly more attainable, but this is an imperfect situation for a lot of us. And so it's the pandemic, frankly, really brought that to light while families were crunched into their houses doing school and work. And I was alone, and it was a very lonely time. I remember in the winter months when the sun would set in Chicago at 4:30 in the afternoon, and you'd have these huge expanses of time in my case where I wasn't out with friends, and I wasn't, you shut Zoom down after you've done a Zoom happy hour with the girls, and it's very lonely. And so what was that saying that was so popular then? JD, maybe you wrote this one too, but we're all in different boats navigating the same storm or the same water. And I think that's still true today. Even, pandemic aside, we're all prioritizing. A lot of the women I'm talking with now are caregiving for young kids, but they're caregiving for elderly parents as well, and trying to figure out, how do I be an advocate for my teenagers and also for my mom when she goes for a hip replacement, and how do I work full time, and how do I wear all the hats? And it's a real challenge.
I think that's a great transition, because as the host of Bound and Determined, this podcast that supports women in the insurance industry, what do you see as the biggest challenge and opportunities also for women in this field?
Oh, the biggest challenge. I'm gonna go a little against what you might think. More women in leadership, more seats at the table. All that is true. What I see, because I hold these they're intimate spaces. People tell me things. It's the nature of my personality and the kind of work that I do. There are a lot of women playing small. And it's not that they want to be the CEO. It's that they want more autonomy at work. They want to be left alone. They want to be trusted to get their job done. They want to make more money. They're having difficulty setting boundaries and then holding them, because boundaries are really uncomfortable for people on the other side when you've never had them before. And so I would say we've got macro issues in the insurance industry, but we also have these micro individual issues where I see women who are striving and then getting to a certain point. And this is different than opting out. This is not an empowered decision. This is feeling like they don't have the right support or the right tools or even the confidence within them to do the thing or to say the thing or to take the action. And that's where the sociologist in me, the human in me comes out. And I just want to keep holding these spaces to help these women move through whatever these blocks are, if they're meant to. And sometimes that's the beauty in these conversations, is it can feel really good just to say it out loud. And they do, and they have a renewed appreciation for where they are, and they go right back to it. But the podcast is interesting because I intentionally don't invite women who are, and all the women on the show are uber successful in my mind as I define it. But I don't want to hear you skip over the parts that got you to the C-suite. If you're not willing to talk about the stubbing your toe and the times when you thought it might not work out, or the times that your back was against the wall, or the trouble, the challenges that you've faced, you're not really speaking to a woman on her journey. And that's who I want to make sure that we reach. We all got where we got somewhere and somehow. And I think there's a real beauty in being able to share vulnerably some of those things along the way. And so we talk about things like menopause and infertility and grief and loss. And I've got episodes coming up on getting fired, losing your job, involuntary separation, which is a very real thing. We've talked about sobriety on the podcast. I really try to capture the conversations that for many of us as women, we were challenged to leave at the door when we showed up for work. So what are the things that we're talking about, maybe with our friends or girlfriends over coffee or wine after hours, but that are very resonant for us in the insurance industry? And though the podcast is with women in mind, many of my listeners are men. And I love when they circle back and help me to see the value in what we're doing, because it helps them to see the women in their lives differently. I didn't know this is how she felt. I didn't understand that this is what that colleague or even my partner or spouse might be going through. So the podcast is my proudest professional accomplishment. I don't know that I can say that forever, but there are conversations that one of my guests passed away. So her conversation has become part of her legacy. And so every time, I don't often look at the back end of the podcast, I don't get super hung up on the numbers, but hers is the most listened to episode by far. And it just brings me peace and joy knowing that it's out there and that her family and loved ones can get that glimpse into her story and hopefully have that forever. So we keep going. It's a really cool medium that I'm really glad exists right now in the world.
I really enjoyed listening to your podcast, and especially when you're hitting upon things of vulnerability. Our podcast is about leadership sometimes, and sometimes it's about sandwiches. So,
True.
Do you have a favorite sandwich? And is it bad if someone doesn't have a planned career path or a map?
Oh my God, I love this. Yeah. So in addition to not drinking, I also eat vegan, and I have for a long time. And so I've perfected a vegan egg McMuffin. So I'm calling that my favorite sandwich, and I will happily share the recipe with anyone who would like it. But it's a go-to many, many days for lunch. And your second question, remind me what your second question was. I got so excited about my egg McMuffin.
No, it sounds great. I was just curious if it's bad if you don't have a planned career path or a map.
Yeah. Oh, this is like the $8 billion question, because I have to be really honest. I worked in the corporate space for almost 20 years before I went out on my own. And I didn't have a plan for that chapter of my life, but even not having a plan, I did all right. And I think about the financial piece of that, because I worked for financially sound companies in a very stable industry, I was able to save, frankly. And so the risk of going out on my own 7 years ago was a lot less so, because I had a nice foundation built for myself. The path itself, I think it's okay if you don't. And I think this generation coming into the industry and into the workforce is really going to challenge our notion around work, the number of jobs that they will have and the number of jobs they will have simultaneously, and the concept of gig working, and the idea that we ask them to put their butt in a seat for 40 hours a week for 50 years. They're not going to do it. And I don't want them. I didn't want to do it either. I hit my breaking point, that's for sure. And so I think the notion of career path is going to look really different as the generational shifts keep happening out there. And I don't have the answers except to say education is going to be really important to build that credibility. I don't think that's going to change. And also, you're never too young to build your network. even if you feel like you don't have anything to contribute in return, you absolutely do. And I've been just absolutely in the best way floored by some of the young people that have approached me after a speaking engagement with a video clip and said, I took this for you. Can I send it to you? That's gold for me as a professional speaker, for somebody to have real-time video that I can then share on social media or on my website. It's great. And I had a gal leverage that for a coffee meeting. Could she sit and pick my brain, which I don't often. My brain is expensive. It costs a lot of money to put in my brain what's in my brain, and you will pay for that. But I do hold space throughout to have conversations with college students or other people that are along their way. And that barter, or that sense of reciprocation, even when it's not in kind, can be really valuable. And I'm all about it.
That's awesome. And I love that bit of advice, for those up and coming too.
Yeah.
You be curious, right? As Ted Lasso taught us as well. So final question for you. You focus on creating customized learning experiences for your clients. So what do you believe are the key elements in designing effective sales and leadership training in today's really fast-paced insurance industry?
Yeah. This is a saying that I think we overuse, but this idea of meeting people where they are, I think a lot of us think we are, but it's death by PowerPoint. It's stories and anecdotes that don't land. And whenever I'm doing a training, whether it's 2 hours or 4 hours or 2 days or a 30-minute keynote, which I consider a training, by the way, we kind of separate those, but there's learning happening all the time in all of these different formats. I always leave more space for the audience to participate than for me to talk to them. And so I come in with concepts. I know the things that I want them to understand when we end our session, but it's going to resonate so much more with them if they help me to build the content as we go. And so highly, highly interactive. One of my favorite workshops to do right now, the insurance market is very cyclical, soft market, hard market. We're in a hard market right now. Prices are high, capacity is low. A lot of people are really frustrated on both the consumer side and the producer side. Is to go into an insurance company and help them understand that the market's going to turn again. And we need to make sure that we're not alienating our best customers because of the decisions that we're making right now. And so being able to, I've sat on both sides of this conversation in my career. And so to be able to bring that experience in real time and speak in a way that is very real and it's very present right now. As a coach, people tell me firsthand what they're dealing with. So I know exactly what's going on right now in the industry, and to be able to bring those examples back is really helpful. The other part of that for a longer workshop is I invite leadership to be in the room in the beginning, because I really want them to understand the message that I'm delivering to their team. I want them to validate it too. So many times as a consultant, I'm brought in to regurgitate what leadership is already saying, but because I'm a third party, they believe me, which is like super, super bummer for, a corporate culture that may be struggling a little bit, but also human nature. Then I ask leadership to leave. Then we really get into the nuts and bolts and we roll up our sleeves. And that's when the vulnerability comes out on the team's part. And the rule is I don't report back. I will not report back to senior leadership what they tell me. But then they let me understand, what's it really like for you right now? What are you actually struggling with? And then we get to work through those things together. So I would say, we've been through this, can we pre-record sessions? Can we do micro learning? Can we do e-learning? Yes, all of those things have their place, but the kinds of training that I'm doing where we're really diving into the human experience has to be delivered by a human. And so I love doing that work, but I love being in the room with professionals as these light bulbs start to go off for them.
That's awesome. Meg, this has been fun. Letting us pick your brain. As I mentioned before, please tune into Meg's podcast because it is fantastic. There's a lot to learn there. And it's called Bound and Determined. Anywhere you get your podcasts, we like to say in the industry. Meg, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks
Meg.
Brett.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This has been great.
What a fantastic journey Meg has been on, Mike. And it was so great to have her as part of the show and to have her as a mentor to those who are up and coming in that industry, but also bringing the insight that she does in her podcast. I thought it was a great conversation.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed talking about work-life balance, vulnerability, and what her favorite sandwich was.
I want to try this vegan egg McMuffin. We got to get that recipe.
It sounds good.
uh,
Got me
for-
in.
But what a great show. And thank you so much to Meg for being with us. If you want to listen to past episodes of C Level Up, go to wherever you get your podcasts, or you can go to jamesdwayne.com. Thanks for listening.